The restaurant fell silent except for the sound of breaking glass. Every server, every busboy, every manager seemed to shrink into the shadows as Harrison Blake stormed through the dining room like a hurricane in a $1,000 suit. His voice cut through the elegant atmosphere of Meridian Restaurant like a blade. "This is completely unacceptable," Harrison shouted at the trembling young waiter. "Do you have any idea who I am? I own this place. I own 17 restaurants in this city alone." Carlos Rodriguez, barely 22 and working his way through college, stood frozen with a broken wine glass at his feet. His hands shook as he tried to clean up the mess. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blake. It was an accident. I'll pay for the wine." "Pay for it?" Harrison's laugh was cold and bitter. "That bottle costs more than you make in a month. You're fired. Get out of my sight." Nia Washington watched this scene unfold from table 12, where she sat with her 5-year-old daughter Imani. The little girl was picking at her birthday cake, her eyes wide with confusion at the angry man's voice. Nia felt her chest tighten with familiar anger. She had seen this kind of behavior before, but never quite this cruel. Mrs. Chin, the restaurant manager, appeared at Harrison's side like a nervous bird. Her usually confident demeanor had completely disappeared. "Mr. Blake, perhaps we could discuss this privately. The other guests can find somewhere else to eat if they don't like it," Harrison snapped. His cold blue eyes swept across the restaurant, and every person who made eye contact immediately looked away. "This is my establishment and I expect perfection." Nia watched as Janet Thompson, one of the waitresses she had come to know over their monthly visits here, literally ducked behind the bar to avoid being seen. The woman had 3 children at home and couldn't afford to lose this job. The security guard by the door took 2 steps backward when Harrison's gaze fell on him. "Mommy," Imani whispered, tugging on Nia's sleeve. "Why is that man being so mean?" Before Nia could answer, Harrison's attention turned toward their table. His eyes narrowed as he noticed the prime location by the window where they sat. It was the best table in the restaurant, with a perfect view of the city lights beginning to twinkle as evening approached. He strode over with purpose, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor. "Excuse me," he said, though his tone held no courtesy. "I need this table. There's been a mistake with the reservations." Nia looked up at him calmly, her dark eyes meeting his without flinching. She was beautiful in a quiet, natural way that didn't rely on expensive clothes or jewelry. Her nurse scrubs had been replaced by a simple black dress for this special occasion, and her hair was pulled back in an elegant bun. "I'm sorry, but we're not finished with our meal." Harrison blinked, clearly not expecting resistance. "I don't think you understand. I own this restaurant. When I say I need a table, people move." "I understand perfectly," Nia said, her voice steady and calm. "But today is my daughter's 5th birthday and we've been planning this dinner for weeks. We're not moving." The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Even the kitchen staff had stopped their work to peer through the service window. No one had ever seen anyone stand up to Harrison Blake. His reputation for destroying careers and businesses with a single phone call was legendary in the city. Harrison's face began to turn red. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" "A man who apparently never learned basic manners," Nia replied, cutting a small piece of cake for Imani. "My daughter is having her birthday dinner, and we're staying until she's finished." Imani looked up at the tall, angry man towering over their table. "Today is my birthday," she said in her small, clear voice. "I'm 5 years old now." For just a moment, something flickered across Harrison's face. But it was gone so quickly that Nia almost thought she imagined it. "This is ridiculous," Harrison said, pulling out his phone. "Security, I want these people removed from my restaurant immediately." The security guard approached reluctantly, looking like he would rather be anywhere else in the world. "Mr. Blake, they haven't done anything wrong. They have a valid reservation." "I don't care about their reservation," Harrison snapped. "I want them gone. Now." Nia remained seated, one protective hand on Imani's shoulder. "We're not causing any trouble. We're simply enjoying a quiet birthday dinner. If you have a problem with that, perhaps you should examine why a 5-year-old child threatens you so much." The words hit their mark. Harrison's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Around them, the other diners watched in fascination and growing respect for the woman who refused to be intimidated. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," Harrison said, his voice low and dangerous. "I can make your life very difficult." "My life is already difficult," Nia replied simply. "I work night shifts at the hospital, I'm raising my daughter alone, and I save every penny for months just to bring her here once a year. But I won't let that fear stop me from doing what's right." Mrs. Chin appeared again, wringing her hands nervously. Mr. Blake, perhaps we could offer these lovely guests a complimentary dessert and find you another table? I don't want another table, Harrison said through gritted teeth. I want this table. And I want these people gone. Nia stood up slowly, her full height making her nearly as tall as Harrison. She was tired, bone-deep tired from working double shifts and worrying about bills and trying to be both mother and father to Imani. But she was not broken and she would not be bullied. Then you're going to be disappointed, she said quietly. Because we're staying right here until my daughter finishes her birthday cake. You can call security, you can call the police, you can call the mayor for all I care. But a 5-year-old girl deserves to have her special day without some grown man throwing a tantrum because he can't have his way. The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the restaurant was fixed on the standoff between the powerful billionaire and the single mother who refused to back down. What would you do if you saw someone being cruel to service workers? Subscribe and tell us in the comments how you would handle this situation. Harrison Blake had never been refused anything in his adult life. Money, power, and intimidation had always been enough to get exactly what he wanted when he wanted it. Standing in his own restaurant, faced with a woman who seemed completely immune to all three, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: confusion. Do you know how much money I have? He asked, pulling out his wallet. I could buy you a better dinner at any restaurant in the city. Name your price. Nia didn't even glance at the wallet. She was focused on helping Imani with her cake, making sure the little girl got the piece with the most frosting roses. Money can't buy you basic human decency, she said without looking up. And it certainly can't make up for ruining a child's birthday. Harrison's jaw tightened. He was used to people either cowering in fear or jumping at the chance to take his money. This woman was doing neither, and it was throwing him completely off balance. Mrs. Chen, he called sharply. I want you to cancel their reservation permanently. They are banned from all of my restaurants, effective immediately. Mrs. Chin shifted uncomfortably, but before she could respond, Nia finally looked up at Harrison. Her dark eyes were calm but filled with a strength that made him take an involuntary step backward. Go ahead, she said simply. Ban us. Take away the one nice thing my daughter and I do together each year. Prove to everyone watching that you're exactly the kind of man they think you are. Around them, other diners were no longer pretending not to watch. Some were holding up their phones, recording the exchange. Harrison realized with growing horror that this confrontation was going to be all over social media within hours. You don't understand the position you're putting me in, he said, lowering his voice slightly. I can't just let people defy me in my own establishment. It sets a precedent. The only precedent being set here is whether you're going to act like a decent human being or continue behaving like a spoiled child, Nia replied. She wiped a spot of frosting from Imani's cheek with gentle fingers. My daughter is watching this, you know. She's learning about how people treat each other when they think they have power over someone else. Imani looked up at Harrison with curious 5-year-old eyes. Are you sad? She asked innocently. You seem really angry. My mommy says people are usually angry when they're sad about something. The simple question hit Harrison like a physical blow. He found himself looking down at this small child, really seeing her for the first time. She had her mother's dark eyes and a gap-toothed smile that was somehow both shy and fearless. I'm not sad, he said automatically, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. It's okay if you are, Imani said seriously. Sometimes I get angry when I'm sad too. Mommy says it's normal. Nia watched this exchange with growing interest. For the first time since the confrontation began, Harrison seemed at a loss for words. The staff around them were still watching, but their expressions had shifted from fear to fascination. Look, Harrison said, trying to regain control of the situation. I'll have the manager prepare a private dining room for you. Full service, no charge. You can finish your meal in peace. We don't want a private dining room, Nia said firmly. We want to sit right here where we made our reservation and finish our dinner like normal customers. That's all we ever wanted. Harrison ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up for the first time in years. You're being unreasonable. I'm being a mother, Nia corrected. I'm showing my daughter that she doesn't have to accept poor treatment from anyone, no matter how much money they have or how important they think they are. Carlos, the young waiter Harrison had fired earlier, appeared at the edge of their conversation. He had been gathering his things to leave, but something had made him stop and listen. Mr. Blake, Carlos said quietly, his voice shaking but determined. This lady is right. You can't just treat people however you want because you own things. Harrison spun around, his face darkening with renewed anger. I thought I told you to get out. You did, Carlos said, standing a little straighter. But I've been working here for 2 years and I've watched you make good people quit, make servers cry, and turn this place into somewhere people are afraid to work. Maybe it's time someone told you the truth. Janet Thompson emerged from behind the bar where she had been hiding. Carlos is right, Mr. Blake. We're all scared of you. We walk on eggshells every day hoping we won't be the one you decide to destroy. More staff members began to appear, drawn by the unprecedented scene of their boss being challenged. Mrs. Chen looked terrified, but even she seemed to be listening with new interest. This is mutiny, Harrison said, but his voice had lost much of its power. I could fire every one of you. You could, Nia said, cutting another small piece of cake for Imani. But then who would run your restaurants? And more importantly, would you be able to live with yourself? Harrison stared at her, this woman who seemed completely unimpressed by his wealth and position. She was focused on her daughter, making sure the little girl's birthday remained special despite the chaos around them. What do you want from me? He asked finally, the question coming out more vulnerable than he intended. Nia looked up at him again and for the first time, her expression softened slightly. I want you to let my daughter finish her birthday dinner in peace. That's all I've ever wanted. And then we'll leave just like we planned to. And maybe next year when we come back for her 6th birthday, you'll remember that treating people with kindness costs nothing but means everything. Harrison stood there, surrounded by his staff, faced with a 5-year-old who had asked if he was sad and a mother who refused to be intimidated. For the first time in years he wasn't sure what to do next. The standoff might have continued indefinitely if not for the small sound that changed everything. It started as a slight wheeze, barely audible over the restaurant's ambient noise. But Nia's trained ears caught it immediately. Imani baby, are you okay? Nia's voice shifted instantly from calm defiance to concerned mother. The little girl was touching her chest, her breathing becoming more labored. Mommy, it feels tight, she whispered, her eyes beginning to show the fear that every asthmatic child knows too well. Nia was moving before Harrison even realized what was happening. She pulled a small inhaler from her purse with practiced efficiency, helping Imani position it correctly while speaking in soothing, professional tones. Okay, sweetheart, you know what to do. Big breath in, hold it, count to 10 with me. Harrison watched, transfixed, as the woman who had been standing up to him moments before transformed into something else entirely. Every movement was purposeful, calm, expert. This wasn't just a mother helping her child. This was a medical professional in action. Is she going to be okay? Harrison found himself asking, his earlier anger completely forgotten. Nia didn't answer immediately. She was focused on Imani's breathing, watching the rise and fall of her small chest, monitoring her color. After what felt like an eternity, Imani's breathing began to ease. Better? Nia asked gently, smoothing Imani's hair. The little girl nodded, leaning against her mother's side. I'm sorry I interrupted my birthday dinner, she said in a small voice. Oh, sweetheart, you didn't interrupt anything, Nia said, gathering Imani closer. Sometimes our bodies just need a little help and that's perfectly okay. Harrison stood watching this tender scene, feeling something crack open inside his chest. The restaurant around them had gone completely quiet, but it was a different kind of silence now. It wasn't the tense hush of people afraid of his anger, it was the reverent quiet of people witnessing something real and beautiful. You're a nurse? Harrison said suddenly. It wasn't a question. Nia looked up at him while still holding Imani. Night shift at General Hospital. Pediatric ward. That explains so much. The calm under pressure, the way she had handled his bullying without fear, the quiet confidence that had made him feel small and petty. She was used to dealing with life and death situations. His tantrum must have seemed ridiculous by comparison. Does she need to go to the hospital? Harrison asked, surprising himself with the genuine concern in his voice. I don't think so, Nia said, checking Imani's breathing again. But I should probably take her home, let her rest. Sometimes the excitement of special occasions can trigger an episode. Imani's eyes filled with tears. But I didn't finish my birthday cake. We can take it home, baby, Nia said softly. We'll have cake and ice cream in our pajamas. That sounds pretty special, doesn't it? Harrison watched this exchange and felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the desire to help someone without expecting anything in return. My car is outside, he heard himself saying. It would be faster than waiting for a taxi. Nia hesitated, clearly torn between her instinct to refuse help from the man who had been tormenting her and her practical need to get Imani home quickly. Please, Harrison added, and the word felt foreign in his mouth. When was the last time he had said please to anyone? I have a driver. You wouldn't have to deal with traffic or parking. Mommy, I'm tired, Imani said, settling the debate. Nia nodded. Thank you. That would be helpful. Harrison pulled out his phone, but instead of the sharp, demanding tone he usually used with his staff, he found himself speaking quietly. Richard, bring the car around to the front entrance, please. We have a little girl who needs to get home. While they waited, Harrison watched Nia pack up Imani's birthday cake with the same careful attention she gave everything else. Mrs. Chin appeared with a beautiful box and helped transfer the cake safely. I'm sorry about all of this, Mrs. Chin said quietly to Nia. Your daughter shouldn't have had to deal with such upset on her birthday. It's not your fault, Nia replied, but her eyes moved to Harrison as she said it. Carlos approached hesitantly, carrying his own things. Harrison had forgotten that he had fired the young man in his earlier rage. I hope your little girl feels better, Carlos said to Nia. Then, gathering his courage, he looked at Harrison. Mr. Blake, I know you fired me, but if you change your mind, I really need this job. I'm putting myself through school. Harrison looked at the young man he had humiliated in front of the entire restaurant. Carlos had made an honest mistake, the kind that happened in busy restaurants every day. The kind that could be cleaned up and forgotten with a little basic human decency. You're not fired, Harrison said quietly. Everyone makes mistakes. Carlos's face lit up with relief and gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Blake. Thank you so much. Richard appeared at the entrance and Harrison gestured toward the door. The car is here. As they walked outside, Imani looked up at Harrison with her big, serious eyes. Thank you for helping us, she said politely. Mommy always says we should say thank you when people are nice to us. Harrison found himself crouching down to her level, something he had never done with a child before. You're very welcome, Imani. And happy birthday. She smiled at him then, a real 5-year-old smile that lit up her whole face. Maybe next year you can have some of my birthday cake too. If you want. As Harrison helped them into his car, he caught Nia's eye. For the first time since their confrontation began, she looked at him without anger or wariness. There was something else there now, something that might have been the beginning of understanding. Thank you, she said simply. This really does help. As the car pulled away, Harrison stood on the sidewalk outside his restaurant, watching the taillights disappear into the city traffic. Inside, his staff was probably discussing what they had just witnessed. Tomorrow there would likely be videos online and stories about the night Harrison Blake met his match. But all he could think about was a 5-year-old girl who had asked if he was sad, and her mother who had shown him what real strength looked like. Harrison stood outside the restaurant long after his car disappeared around the corner. The evening air was cool against his skin, and for the first time in years he felt uncertain about his next move. Usually, after any kind of confrontation he would retreat to his penthouse apartment, pour himself an expensive scotch and plan his revenge. But tonight felt different. Instead, he found himself walking back into the restaurant where his staff was still buzzing with nervous energy about what they had witnessed. Mrs. Chin approached him cautiously, as if she wasn't sure which version of Harrison Blake had returned. Mr. Blake, should we prepare your usual table? She asked. Harrison looked around the dining room, seeing it differently than he had an hour ago. He noticed how the servers moved carefully around certain tables, how they kept their voices low and their smiles forced. He saw the tension in their shoulders, the way they glanced toward him whenever they thought he wasn't looking. No, he said quietly. I think I'll go home tonight. But instead of going home, Harrison found himself driving through the city streets, his mind replaying the evening's events. He kept thinking about Imani's question, "Are you sad?" It was such a simple question from such a small person, but it had hit him like a sledgehammer. Was he sad? He had everything money could buy. Multiple homes, expensive cars, a business empire that generated more wealth than he could spend in several lifetimes. But when was the last time someone had smiled at him the way Imani had smiled when he crouched down to her level? Without really planning to, Harrison found himself pulling into the parking lot of General Hospital. He sat in his car for several minutes, wondering what he was doing there. Then he remembered, Nia worked here. She was probably inside right now, starting her night shift after dealing with her daughter's asthma attack and his ridiculous behavior. He didn't go inside. Instead, he sat in his car and thought about what he had learned about Nia Washington in the brief time he had known her. She was a single mother working night shifts to support her daughter. She saved money for months just to afford one special dinner a year. She had stood up to him not because she wasn't afraid, but because protecting her daughter was more important than her fear. The next morning, Harrison did something he had never done before. He called his assistant and canceled all his meetings. Instead, he drove back to the hospital and asked to speak with the administrator. I'd like to make a donation, he told the surprised administrator. To the pediatric ward specifically. 4 families who can't afford their children's medical treatments. The administrator's eyes widened when Harrison named the amount. It was substantial enough to help dozens of families, maybe hundreds. That's incredibly generous, Mr. Blake. May I ask what inspired this donation? Harrison thought about Imani's labored breathing and Nia's calm competence in the face of her daughter's medical emergency. I met a little girl last night who reminded me that some things are more important than money. That afternoon, Harrison went to his restaurant. He had been thinking about his staff, about Carlos and Janet and all the others who walked on eggshells around him. He called a meeting with everyone who worked there. I owe you all an apology, he began, the words feeling strange in his mouth. I've been treating you poorly for a long time, and that stops today. The staff exchanged glances, clearly unsure if this was some kind of test or trap. Effective immediately, everyone gets a 20% raise. We're also implementing full health insurance coverage and paid sick days. And I want feedback about how to make this a better place to work. Janet Thompson raised her hand tentatively. Mr. Blake, are you feeling all right? Despite everything, Harrison almost smiled. I'm feeling like I need to make some changes. Over the next few weeks, Harrison found himself thinking often about Nia and Imani. He wondered how the little girl was doing, whether her breathing had improved, if she had enjoyed the rest of her birthday cake in her pajamas as her mother had promised. He began making other changes too. He visited his restaurants unannounced, but instead of looking for things to criticize, he tried to notice things that were going well. He learned his employees' names and asked about their families. Slowly, the atmosphere in his establishments began to change. But he couldn't stop thinking about the woman who had stood up to him and the little girl who had invited him to share her birthday cake next year. The thought of waiting 11 months to see them again felt unbearable. So exactly 1 month after their first encounter, Harrison found himself back at the restaurant, sitting at a table across the room from table 12. He had asked Mrs. Chin to let him know if a woman and a little girl came in with a reservation for that specific table. At 7:30 that evening, Nia and Imani walked through the door. Harrison watched from his distant table as they were seated. Imani was wearing a bright yellow dress and had a small tiara on her head. Even from across the room, he could see her animated chatter as she told her mother something that was clearly very important. He noticed that Nia looked tired. There were shadows under her eyes that spoke of long hospital shifts and worry about her daughter's health and their finances. But she was smiling as she listened to Imani, giving the little girl her complete attention. Harrison sat there for nearly an hour watching them enjoy their dinner together. He saw the way Nia cut Imani's food into perfect small pieces, the way she laughed at her daughter's jokes, the way she made this monthly dinner feel like the most important event in the world. When they were nearly finished with their meal, Harrison finally gathered the courage to approach their table. Imani saw him first and her face lit up with recognition. It's the sad man from my birthday, she announced loudly enough for half the restaurant to hear. But you don't look as sad tonight. Nia looked up and Harrison saw surprise and wariness cross her face. Mr. Blake. Please, he said, just Harrison. I was wondering if I could ask you something. Nia studied Harrison's face carefully, looking for signs of the angry, demanding man who had tried to ruin her daughter's birthday a month ago. What she saw instead was someone who looked genuinely uncertain, almost vulnerable. What did you want to ask? She said cautiously. Harrison glanced around the restaurant, noticing that several staff members were watching their interaction with intense interest. Could we talk privately? I promise I'm not here to cause any trouble. We can talk here, Nia said firmly. Imani, keep eating your dinner, sweetheart. Harrison pulled an empty chair from a nearby table and sat down, being careful to keep his distance so Nia wouldn't feel trapped. I wanted to apologize. Properly this time. What I did to you and your daughter was inexcusable. Nia didn't respond immediately. She was still protective, still ready to defend her daughter if needed. Okay. I'm listening. I've been thinking about what happened for weeks, Harrison continued. About what you said, what your daughter asked me. And I realized that you were right about everything. I was acting like a spoiled child and I was taking my problems out on people who didn't deserve it. Imani looked up from her chicken fingers with interest. What kind of problems do you have? You seem like you have a lot of money. Imani, Nia said gently, that's not really our business. It's okay, Harrison said, finding himself speaking directly to the 5-year-old. You're right, I do have a lot of money. But money doesn't fix everything. Sometimes when people have a lot of money, they forget how to be nice to other people. That's silly, Imani said matter-of-factly. Being nice doesn't cost any money. That's what Mommy always tells me. Harrison felt that familiar crack in his chest, the same one he had felt when Imani asked if he was sad. Your mommy is very smart. Nia was watching this exchange with growing curiosity. The man sitting at their table was nothing like the tyrant who had terrorized the restaurant staff a month ago. There was something different in his eyes, something that looked almost like hope. I also wanted to thank you, Harrison said, turning back to Nia. You could have just moved to another table that night. Most people would have. But you didn't, and that made me take a hard look at the kind of person I had become. I didn't do it for you, Nia said honestly. I did it for Imani. And for the staff who were too scared to stand up for themselves. I know. That's what made it so powerful. Nia took a sip of her water, considering her next words carefully. Have you actually changed anything, or are you just feeling guilty? The question was direct and challenging, exactly what Harrison was beginning to expect from Nia Washington. I've made some changes. Big ones. I gave everyone at my restaurants raises and health insurance. I donated money to the pediatric ward here at the hospital. I'm trying to treat people better. That's good, Nia said simply. Your employees deserve better treatment. Harrison nodded, then hesitated before continuing. I was wondering about Imani's medical care. I know asthma treatments can be expensive, and working as a nurse, even with insurance. We're managing, Nia said quickly, her defenses going back up. I'm not trying to insult you or suggest you can't take care of your daughter, Harrison said gently. I just know that medical bills can be overwhelming and I'd like to help. Not because I expect anything in return, but because it's the right thing to do. Nia was quiet for a long moment, her protective instincts warring with her practical side. She worked double shifts whenever possible, but the cost of Imani's medications and specialist visits was a constant source of stress. Why? She asked finally. Because a little girl asked me if I was sad and it made me realize that I was. And because her mother showed me that real strength isn't about having power over other people. It's about protecting the people you love and standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Imani had been listening to this conversation with the intense focus that only children possess. Are you still sad? She asked Harrison. Harrison considered the question seriously. Less sad than I was before I met you and your mommy. Good, Imani said with satisfaction. Being sad all the time isn't fun. Nia made a decision. It went against every instinct she had developed from years of taking care of herself and her daughter alone. But something in Harrison's manner convinced her that his offer was genuine. Imani has an appointment with a specialist next week, she said quietly. Dr. Patterson at Children's Medical Center. The consultation alone is going to cost more than I make in a month. Consider it taken care of, Harrison said immediately. And any treatment she needs after that. I can't just accept that much help from someone I barely know, Nia protested. You're not accepting it for yourself, Harrison pointed out. You're accepting it for Imani. There's a difference. Nia looked down at her daughter, who was happily eating her dinner, completely unaware of the financial stress her medical needs caused. The idea of not having to worry about how to pay for her care was almost overwhelming. Thank you, she said finally. But I want to be clear about something. This doesn't mean you get to control our lives or make demands. This is help, not ownership. Understood, Harrison said. I just want to help. No strings attached. Can I ask you something? Nia said. Of course. What happened to you? What made you so angry at the world? Harrison was quiet for a moment, and Nia thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. I lost my parents when I was young. Car accident. I inherited everything, but I was so angry about being alone that I decided everyone else was my enemy. I built walls around myself and convinced myself that being feared was the same as being respected. That must have been very lonely, Nia said gently. It was. I just didn't realize how lonely until someone refused to be afraid of me. Imani had finished her dinner and was now building something elaborate with her remaining French fries. When I'm scared, Mommy hugs me and tells me everything will be okay, she said without looking up from her construction project. Maybe you needed more hugs. The simple wisdom of a 5-year-old hit Harrison harder than any business revelation ever had. I think you're right, he said softly. I think I needed more hugs. The changes in Harrison Blake didn't happen overnight, but they were impossible to ignore. Word spread quickly through the restaurant industry that something had shifted in the man known for his terrible temper and impossible demands. Nia first noticed it when she arrived for Imani's appointment with Dr. Patterson. The receptionist informed her that all costs had been covered in advance, along with any future treatments Imani might need. But what surprised her even more was the respectful, almost gentle way the staff treated the arrangement. There was no condescension, no sense that she was receiving charity. It had been handled with such discretion that she almost wondered if she had imagined it. Dr. Patterson, a kind woman in her 50s, examined Imani thoroughly and prescribed a new inhaler that would help prevent attacks rather than just treat them after they started. This medication is expensive, Dr. Patterson explained, but it should make a significant difference in her quality of life. No more worrying about birthday dinners being interrupted. When Nia went to pick up the prescription, the pharmacist informed her that a special account had been set up to cover all of Imani's medications indefinitely. Walking out of the pharmacy without paying felt surreal, but also like a massive weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Meanwhile, Harrison was discovering what it felt like to be genuinely liked by his employees for the first time in his adult life. Carlos had become something of a spokesman for the staff, no longer afraid to suggest improvements or point out problems that needed attention. "Mr. Blake," Carlos said one afternoon as Harrison made his rounds through the restaurant, "the staff wanted me to ask you something." "What is it?" "We want to do something special for that lady and her little girl. The ones from last month. Maybe we could prepare something extra nice for their next visit?" Harrison felt warmth spread through his chest. "That's a wonderful idea. What did you have in mind?" The staff had clearly been planning this for a while. They wanted to create a special birthday experience for Imani, with a custom cake and decorations, all donated from their own time and resources. They had been inspired by watching Nia stand up for them, and now they wanted to show their appreciation. "We don't want any extra budget from you," Janet explained. "We want to do this ourselves as a thank you." She stood up for all of us that night. Harrison authorized the plan immediately, though he quietly arranged for the staff to be compensated for their extra effort without them knowing it. Word of Harrison's transformation reached beyond his own restaurants. Other business owners began calling, curious about the changes they were hearing about. Some were skeptical, others were genuinely interested in implementing similar policies for their own employees. "What changed your mind?" asked Richard Chin, a fellow restaurant owner, over lunch. "Everyone's talking about your new approach to staff management." Harrison thought about how to answer. "I met someone who showed me the difference between being feared and being respected. I realized I had been choosing fear because it felt easier, but it wasn't making me or anyone else happy. And now I'm learning that treating people well actually makes better business sense. My staff retention is up, customer satisfaction scores have improved, and I sleep better at night." What Harrison didn't mention was how often he thought about Nia and Imani, wondering how they were doing, looking forward to their monthly dinners at the restaurant. He had started timing his own visits to coincide with theirs, though he was careful to keep his distance and not intrude on their special time together. 3 months after their first encounter, Harrison arrived at the restaurant to find Nia sitting alone at table 12. There was no sign of Imani and Nia looked worried. Without thinking, Harrison approached her table. "Is everything all right? Where's Imani?" Nia looked up and Harrison could see the stress in her eyes. "She's with my neighbor tonight. She's been having more frequent attacks lately, even with the new medication. Dr. Patterson wants to do some additional tests." "What kind of tests?" "Nothing dangerous," Nia said quickly. "But they're expensive, and they might show that she needs more intensive treatment. I'm starting to feel like I'm accepting too much help from you already." Harrison sat down across from her without asking permission. "You're not accepting too much help. You're accepting exactly the amount of help your daughter needs." "It's not that simple," Nia said, rubbing her temples. "I've always taken care of us myself. It's hard to let someone else help, especially someone I don't really know." "Then maybe we should get to know each other better," Harrison suggested. "I mean, if you're comfortable with that. I'd like to be friends if that's possible." Nia studied his face, looking for any sign of the arrogant, demanding man she had first met. She still saw traces of that person, but they were overlaid with something gentler, more genuine. "Why?" she asked. "What do you get out of being friends with a single mother who works night shifts?" Harrison considered the question seriously. "Perspective. Honesty. The chance to be around people who like me for who I am, not what I can do for them. And if I'm being completely honest, you and Imani make me want to be a better person." Nia was quiet for a moment, then made a decision that surprised them both. "Would you like to come to the hospital with me tomorrow? For Imani's tests? She's been asking about you and I think she'd like the company." "You'd want me there?" "I think I would, yes. Imani likes you and she's a good judge of character. If you're free." Harrison cleared his entire schedule for the next day without a second thought. The children's wing of the hospital was painted in bright colors and filled with cheerful artwork, but it couldn't completely mask the underlying anxiety that permeated any place where parents worried about their children's health. Harrison felt out of place in his expensive suit among the casually dressed families in the waiting room. Imani spotted him immediately when Nia brought her in for the appointment. Her face lit up with genuine happiness, and she ran over to give him an unexpected hug around his legs. "You came to see me," she said with the pure joy that only children possess. "Mommy said you might, but I wasn't sure." Harrison found himself crouching down to her level again, something that was becoming natural when he talked to Imani. "I wouldn't miss it. How are you feeling today?" "Pretty good," Imani said seriously. "The doctor is going to look at my lungs with a special camera. It won't hurt, but Mommy says it might be a little scary." "Well, if it gets scary, you can hold my hand," Harrison offered. "I have big hands, so there's plenty of room for brave little girls." Nia watched this interaction with growing amazement. She had been prepared for Harrison to be awkward around children, or to treat this hospital visit like a business obligation. Instead, he seemed genuinely concerned about Imani's comfort and well-being. During the long wait for Imani's turn, Harrison kept the little girl entertained with stories about his restaurants and the interesting people who worked there. He told her about Carlos, who was studying to become a teacher, and Janet, who painted beautiful pictures in her spare time. "Do you paint?" Imani asked. "No, I never learned how," Harrison admitted. "I could teach you," Imani offered generously. "It's not hard. You just put the colors where you think they should go." "I would like that very much," Harrison said and realized he meant it. When Imani was called back for her test, she insisted that both Harrison and Nia come with her. The technician was initially reluctant to allow so many people in the examination room, but Imani's sweet request to have her friends nearby was hard to refuse. Harrison watched in fascination as Nia shifted into professional mode, asking informed questions about the procedure and helping to position Imani for the scans. Her medical knowledge was impressive, but what struck him most was how she balanced being a concerned mother with being a healthcare professional. "You're really good at this," he said quietly while Imani was having her images taken. 13 years of nursing, Nia replied. "I started when I was 18, right out of high school. Worked my way through nursing school while working part-time in the hospital." "What made you choose pediatrics?" Nia smiled, watching Imani cooperate perfectly with the technician. "Kids are honest. They tell you exactly how they feel, and when you help them feel better, their gratitude is real. Adults sometimes forget how to be grateful." "I'm learning about gratitude," Harrison said. "Your daughter is a good teacher." When the tests were finished, Imani was tired but proud of how brave she had been. The results would be available in a few days, and Dr. Patterson would call with the results and any recommended treatment changes. "Can we get ice cream?" Imani asked as they left the hospital. "I was very brave, and brave people deserve ice cream." "That sounds like excellent logic to me," Harrison agreed. "Do you know a good ice cream place?" Imani's eyes widened with excitement. "There's one by our apartment that has 37 flavors. I counted them myself." Harrison looked at Nia, who nodded with a small smile. "If you don't mind going to our neighborhood. It's not exactly where you usually spend time." "I'd like to see where you live," Harrison said honestly. The ice cream shop was in a modest strip mall, surrounded by a grocery store, a laundromat, and a small library. It was clean and cheerful, but clearly catered to working families rather than wealthy customers. Harrison felt a few curious glances from other patrons, but no one seemed to recognize him. Imani insisted on showing Harrison every single flavor, providing detailed descriptions of the ones she had tried and educated guesses about the ones she hadn't. She finally settled on a combination of strawberry and chocolate that she declared was perfect for celebrating brave hospital visits. Harrison chose vanilla, which made Imani shake her head sadly. "Vanilla is boring," she informed him. "You should try something with more adventure." "Maybe next time you can help me pick something more adventurous," Harrison suggested. "I will," Imani promised solemnly. As they sat at a small plastic table eating their ice cream, Harrison found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't experienced in years. There was something about Imani's chatter and Nia's quiet presence that made him feel completely comfortable just being himself. "Thank you for coming today," Nia said while Imani was distracted by trying to eat her ice cream before it melted. "It meant a lot to have support there." "Thank you for letting me come," Harrison replied. "I've never spent time in a children's hospital before. It puts things in perspective." "What do you mean?" Harrison watched Imani's determined battle with her rapidly melting ice cream. "All the things I worry about, stress about, get angry about. They all seem pretty trivial compared to a 5-year-old facing medical tests with more courage than most adults show in boardroom meetings. Nia smiled. She is pretty amazing, isn't she? She gets it from her mother, Harrison said quietly. Their eyes met across the small table, and for a moment, something passed between them that was deeper than friendship but not quite ready to be named. Nia looked away first, focusing on cleaning ice cream off Imani's face. We should probably get going, she said. It's almost time for my shift at the hospital. Of course, Harrison said, though he was disappointed that their afternoon was ending. As they walked back to the parking area, Imani slipped her small hand into Harrison's without asking. Will you come to my next birthday dinner? She asked. If your mother says it's okay, I would love to, Harrison replied, looking at Nia over Imani's head. It's okay, Nia said softly. You're always welcome at our table. The test results showed that Imani's asthma was well controlled with her current medication, but Dr. Patterson recommended some additional preventive measures that would require regular monitoring. Harrison had anticipated this and arranged for all costs to be covered, but what he hadn't expected was Nia's invitation to join them for the follow-up appointment. You don't have to keep coming to these medical appointments, Nia said as they sat in Dr. Patterson's office a week later. I know you have important business to attend to. Harrison looked at Imani, who was drawing a picture of what appeared to be the three of them eating ice cream together. Nothing I do is more important than this, he said, and realized it was completely true. Dr. Patterson noticed the dynamic between them with the keen observation skills of someone who had worked with families for decades. Imani is very lucky to have such a strong support system, she commented. Extended family involvement often leads to better health outcomes for children. Neither Harrison nor Nia corrected the doctor's assumption about their relationship, and Harrison found himself wondering what it would be like if they actually were a family. After the appointment, instead of going for ice cream, Nia surprised Harrison by inviting him to their apartment. Imani has been wanting to show you her art supplies, she explained, and I thought you might like to see where we live. The apartment was small but spotlessly clean and filled with evidence of the life Nia had built for herself and her daughter. Children's books were neatly organized on shelves, Imani's artwork covered the refrigerator, and everything was arranged to maximize the limited space. It's not much, Nia said, suddenly self-conscious about the difference between her modest home and Harrison's undoubtedly luxurious living situation. It's perfect, Harrison said and meant it. The apartment felt warm and alive in a way that his penthouse, for all its expensive furnishings, never had. It feels like a real home. Imani immediately set about showing Harrison her art corner, a small table by the window where she kept her crayons, markers, and paper. She had clearly been planning this demonstration for some time. This is where the magic happens, she announced seriously, setting out paper and crayons for both of them. What should we draw? How about you draw whatever you want and I'll try to copy it? Harrison suggested. That's a good idea for beginners, Imani agreed with the gravity of a master artist instructing a novice. Nia made coffee for herself and Harrison while keeping one eye on the art lesson taking place at the small table. She had been watching Harrison with Imani for months now, and she was continually amazed by how naturally he interacted with her daughter. There was no condescension, no awkwardness, just genuine enjoyment of a 5-year-old's company. Tell me about your family, Nia said, settling onto the couch with her coffee while Harrison and Imani drew. You mentioned losing your parents young. Harrison looked up from his attempt to draw what Imani had informed him was a purple elephant riding a rainbow bicycle. There's not much to tell. They died when I was 22, just out of college. Car accident on their way to visit me. I inherited everything and spent the next 20 years being angry about it. 20 years is a long time to carry that kind of pain, Nia said gently. I didn't think of it as pain, Harrison admitted. I thought of it as fuel. It drove me to build the business, to succeed, to prove that I didn't need anyone. But it also made me into someone I didn't like very much. Imani looked up from her drawing. Do you miss them? Your mommy and daddy? The simple question hit Harrison with unexpected force. Yes, he said quietly. I miss them very much. When I miss my daddy, mommy tells me stories about him, Imani said matter-of-factly. Maybe you could tell stories about your mommy and daddy too. Harrison glanced at Nia, who nodded encouragingly. What kind of stories? Happy ones, Imani said firmly. Sad stories make people cry, but happy stories make people smile. So Harrison found himself telling stories he hadn't shared with anyone in 20 years. Stories about his father teaching him to drive in an empty parking lot, about his mother making elaborate Halloween costumes that were always slightly too big because she was convinced he would grow into them. Stories about family vacations and Christmas mornings and ordinary Tuesday dinners that had seemed unremarkable at the time but now felt precious beyond measure. They sound like they were really nice, Imani said when he finished. I bet they would like me and Mommy. I think they would love you both, Harrison said, surprised by how much he meant it. After Imani went to bed, Harrison and Nia sat on the small couch in the living room, sharing a bottle of wine that Harrison had brought from his restaurant. The apartment was quiet except for the distant sounds of the city outside. Can I ask you something personal? Nia said. Of course. Why didn't you ever get married? Have a family of your own? Harrison considered the question seriously. I thought I was protecting myself. After my parents died, I decided that caring about people was too risky. If you don't let anyone get close, they can't hurt you when they leave. But they also can't love you, Nia pointed out. I'm starting to understand that, Harrison said. I spent so long being afraid of losing people that I forgot what I was missing by not having them in the first place. Nia was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in her glass. Imani's father left when she was 2, she said finally. He said he wasn't ready to be a parent, that it was too much responsibility. For a long time, I thought it was better to do everything myself than to risk letting someone disappoint us again. And now I'm wondering if maybe I was being too careful. Imani deserves to have people in her life who care about her, and maybe I do too. Harrison set down his wine glass and turned to face her fully. Nia, I need you to know something. These past few months, getting to know you and Imani, it's changed everything for me. I look forward to your monthly dinners more than any business meeting or social event. I think about you both all the time. And I'm falling in love with both of you if that's something you could ever want. Nia looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of the angry, demanding man she had first met. What she saw instead was someone who had learned to be vulnerable, to care about others, to put someone else's needs before his own. I think I could want that, she said softly. I think I already do. When Harrison kissed her, it was gentle and careful, full of promise and hope rather than passion and demand. It tasted like new beginnings and second chances, like the possibility of a family neither of them had dared to dream of before. The shift from friendship to something deeper happened gradually, like the slow changing of seasons. Harrison began spending more time at Nia and Imani's apartment, helping with homework, sharing simple dinners, and learning the rhythms of a life centered around a child's needs and happiness. Imani adapted to Harrison's increasing presence with the easy acceptance that children have for changes that make their world better. She began asking him to read bedtime stories, to help with school projects, and to attend the small events that mattered so much in a 5-year-old's world. Harrison, you have to come to my school play, Imani announced one evening over dinner. I'm going to be a flower, and flowers need people to watch them grow. I wouldn't miss it, Harrison said seriously. What kind of flower are you going to be? A sunflower, Imani said proudly. Because sunflowers are tall and bright and they make people happy. Nia watched this exchange with a warmth that had become familiar over the past few months. Harrison had seamlessly integrated himself into their small family unit, but he had done it without trying to take charge or change everything to suit his preferences. Instead, he had adapted to their world, learning to find joy in the simple moments that made up their daily life. The school play was held in the elementary school's multipurpose room, with parents and family members crowded onto folding chairs to watch 20 kindergartners perform a story about a garden growing through the seasons. Harrison sat between Nia and an elderly woman who turned out to be Imani's teacher's mother. Which one is yours? The woman asked Harrison as they waited for the play to begin. Harrison felt a flutter of something that might have been pride. The sunflower, he said, pointing to Imani in her bright yellow costume. She's beautiful, the woman said. You and your wife must be very proud. Harrison glanced at Nia, who had heard the exchange. She didn't correct the woman's assumption, and neither did he. The idea of being seen as Imani's father and Nia's husband felt surprisingly natural. During the play, when Imani forgot her lines and simply smiled brightly at the audience instead, Harrison felt his heart swell with an emotion he had never experienced before. This was what it felt like to love a child unconditionally, to be proud of them simply for being themselves. After the play, Imani ran over to them with her face glowing with excitement. Did you see me be a sunflower? I forgot what I was supposed to say, but I remembered to smile like the sun. You were the most beautiful sunflower I've ever seen, Harrison said, lifting her up in a hug. I'm so proud of you. Can we get ice cream to celebrate? Imani asked because in her world, all important events deserved ice cream. That sounds perfect, Nia agreed. At the ice cream shop, Imani entertained them with detailed descriptions of all the other children's performances and her plans for next year's play. Harrison found himself thinking about next year, about being there for future plays and birthdays and all the small moments that made up a childhood. "What are you thinking about?" Nia asked quietly while Imani was distracted by trying to reach the bottom of her ice cream cup with her spoon. "The future," Harrison said honestly. "I'm thinking about what it would be like to be part of this permanently. To be here for all of Imani's school plays and birthday parties and scraped knees and everything else." Nia's heart skipped a beat. They had been moving slowly, carefully, both of them aware that any relationship between them would ultimately affect Imani as much as themselves. But Harrison's words sounded like he was thinking about the same future she had begun to imagine. "What would that look like?" she asked. Harrison reached across the table and took her hand. "It would look like us. Like a family. Like me officially adopting Imani if you'd both want that. Like maybe giving her a little brother or sister someday. Like growing old together and watching her grow up and have her own family." Nia felt tears prick her eyes. She had never allowed herself to hope for this kind of love, this kind of partnership. "Are you proposing to me in an ice cream shop?" "Not yet," Harrison said with a smile. "When I propose, it's going to be somewhere special. But I'm asking if you think that's something you might want someday." Before Nia could answer, Imani looked up from her ice cream with chocolate smeared across her cheek. "Are you guys talking about getting married?" she asked with the directness of a child. "How did you know that?" Nia asked, surprised. "Because you're holding hands and looking all googly-eyed like people do in movies before they get married," Imani explained. "Also, Harrison, if you marry Mommy, does that mean you'll be my daddy?" Harrison felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Would you like that?" Imani considered this seriously. "Well, my real daddy doesn't come to see me or send me birthday cards or help when I have asthma attacks. But you do all those things. So I think you're already kind of my daddy, aren't you?" "I would be honored to be your daddy," Harrison said, his voice thick with emotion. "If that's what you want." "It is," Imani said decisively. "But I think you should ask Mommy properly with a ring and everything. That's how it works in all the best stories." Nia laughed through her tears. "When did you become such an expert on proposals?" "I pay attention," Imani said with dignity. "And I think Harrison would make a very good daddy. He's learned how to not be sad all the time and he gives really good hugs." That night, after Imani was asleep, Harrison and Nia sat on the couch talking about their future with a seriousness that felt both exciting and slightly overwhelming. "Are you sure about this?" Nia asked. "Marrying someone with a child is complicated. You'd be taking on a lot of responsibility." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Harrison said. "Nia, you and Imani saved me from becoming someone I hated. You showed me what real love looks like, what a real family could be. I want to spend the rest of my life making you both as happy as you've made me." 3 weeks later, Harrison took Nia and Imani back to the restaurant where they had first met. He had arranged for them to have table 12, the same table where Nia had refused to move and changed all their lives forever. After dinner, as they were sharing Imani's birthday cake, even though her actual birthday was still months away, Harrison got down on one knee beside their table. "Nia Washington," he said, pulling out a ring that sparkled in the restaurant's soft lighting, "will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and Imani's father? Will you help me be the man I want to be for the rest of our lives?" Nia said yes through happy tears and Imani clapped her hands with delight. Around them, the restaurant staff who had witnessed their entire love story burst into applause. It wasn't the most elaborate proposal in the world, but it was perfect for them. It was honest and real and full of the love that had grown quietly between them over months of learning to trust and care for each other. Have you ever seen someone completely change their heart for love? Share your story below and subscribe for more inspiring tales of second chances and unexpected families. The wedding planning process revealed just how much Harrison had changed from the demanding, controlling man he used to be. Instead of insisting on an elaborate, expensive affair that would impress business associates, he deferred to Nia's preferences for something smaller and more intimate. "I want our families there and the people who matter to us," Nia said as they looked through venue options. "Not a bunch of people we barely know." "Whatever makes you happy," Harrison said and meant it completely. They decided on a small ceremony in the hospital chapel where Nia worked, followed by a reception at Harrison's restaurant. It seemed fitting to celebrate their new beginning in the places that had shaped their relationship. Imani took her role as flower girl very seriously, practicing her walk down the aisle with a basket of rose petals that she insisted on counting and recounting to make sure there were enough. She had also appointed herself as the wedding's chief advisor, offering opinions on everything from Nia's dress to the cake flavors. Make sure you smile really big when you see Mommy in her dress, Imani instructed Harrison during one of their planning sessions. That's what daddies do in movies. I'll definitely smile, Harrison promised. I smile every time I see your mommy. Good, Imani said with satisfaction. And don't cry. Crying is for sad times and weddings are happy times. What if I cry because I'm happy? Harrison asked. Imani considered this carefully. I guess that's okay. Happy crying is different from sad crying. The night before the wedding, Harrison couldn't sleep. He found himself thinking about the journey that had brought him to this point, from the angry, lonely man who had tried to force people to move from their restaurant table to someone who was about to become a husband and father. He thought about his parents, wishing they could be there to see him marry Nia and meet their granddaughter. He had the feeling they would love both of them and more importantly, that they would be proud of the man he had become. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful. Nia got ready at the hospital, surrounded by her nursing colleagues who had become like family to her over the years. She had chosen a simple white dress that was elegant without being ostentatious, and she looked radiant as she prepared to marry the man who had proven that people really could change. Harrison waited at the altar with Dr. Patterson, who had agreed to officiate the ceremony. Carlos and Janet from the restaurant were there, along with Mrs. Chen and many of the other staff members who had witnessed their love story unfold. Harrison's business associates were notably absent. This celebration was for the people who truly mattered. When the music began and Imani started her careful walk down the aisle, scattering rose petals with intense concentration, Harrison felt his eyes fill with happy tears. She looked like a little angel in her white dress, and she was about to officially become his daughter. But when Nia appeared at the back of the chapel, everything else faded away. She was beautiful, but more than that, she was his. This incredible woman who had stood up to him, challenged him, and loved him into becoming a better person was about to become his wife. You can smile now, Imani whispered loudly as she took her place beside them, causing everyone to laugh. Harrison did smile, the biggest, happiest smile of his life. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to love and support each other through whatever challenges life might bring. When Dr. Patterson pronounced them husband and wife, the small congregation erupted in cheers. But Harrison had one more surprise for his new family. At the reception, as they were cutting the cake, Harrison stood up to address their guests. Thank you all for being here to celebrate with us, he began. This has been the happiest day of my life, but before we continue the party, I have something I want to share with my new wife and daughter. He pulled out an official-looking folder that made Nia's heart skip a beat. 6 months ago, I asked my lawyers to help me with a special project. Today, I'm proud to announce the establishment of the Imani Washington Foundation. Nia gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The foundation will provide medical care, medications, and support services for single mothers and their children who are dealing with chronic health conditions. It will be funded in perpetuity, and it will help hundreds of families every year. The room was completely silent as the magnitude of Harrison's gift sank in. But that's not all, Harrison continued, looking directly at Imani, who was listening with wide eyes even though she didn't fully understand what was happening. The foundation will be run by a board of directors that includes doctors, nurses, and parents who understand what these families are going through. And when she's old enough, if she wants to, Imani will have a permanent seat on that board. Nia was crying now, overwhelmed by the generosity and thoughtfulness of Harrison's surprise. This wasn't just a donation, it was a legacy that would honor their love story while helping countless other families. Why? Nia asked through her tears. Why did you do this? Harrison took her hands in his. Because a little girl asked me if I was sad, and her mother showed me that love is stronger than fear. Because you both taught me that the best way to honor the people who change your life is to pass that gift on to others. He knelt down to Imani's level just as he had done so many times before. Someday when you're older, you'll be able to help other little girls who have trouble breathing just like you did. You'll be able to make sure they get the medicine they need and that their mommies don't have to worry about paying for it. Imani nodded solemnly, understanding the importance of what Harrison was telling her even if she didn't grasp all the details. Will you help me help them? Every step of the way, Harrison promised. We'll do it together as a family. As the evening went on, their guests celebrated not just a wedding, but the power of love to transform lives. Harrison danced with his new wife and daughter, surrounded by people who had watched him change from someone to be feared into someone to be loved. Later that night, as they tucked Imani into bed in what would soon be her new room in Harrison's penthouse, which they were already planning to trade for a more family-friendly home, she looked up at her new parents with sleepy contentment. "This was the best day ever," she said with a yawn. "Even better than my birthday." "Why is that?" Nia asked, smoothing Imani's hair. "Because now we're a real family," Imani said simply. "And families stick together forever." As Harrison and Nia stood in the doorway watching their daughter drift off to sleep, they both knew that Imani was right. They had found something that money couldn't buy and power couldn't create. A love that had grown from the most unlikely beginnings into something beautiful and lasting. Harrison Blake had learned that the most important questions in life weren't about profit margins or business deals. They were questions like, "Are you sad?" asked by a 5-year-old who cared enough to notice. They were about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. They were about the courage to change, the willingness to love, and the grace to accept love in return. And as he held his new wife close and listened to his daughter's quiet breathing, Harrison knew that he had found all the answers he would ever need.